Belle, thanks for joining us. What are you hearing from people inside Gaza?
Well, I've actually just come off the phone to some of my colleagues who are in Gaza who said that they have witnessed one of the heaviest bombardments that they've ever had to experience, rivaling some of the worst nights in the 2014 war 7 years ago. They sent me video footage from their own homes, and you can see children crying, you can see the windows shaking, the walls shaking, and a relentless sound of artillery fire coming from the sea, coming from the ground, and also airstrikes as well. So at least from the Gazan population, they had a pretty horrendous evening when this new sort of escalation was announced earlier on.
And what's the latest on the death toll so far in Gaza?
Well, I've just received a message probably about half an hour ago from the Gaza Health Ministry that said that 109 Gazans have been killed, including 28 children. So the death toll is steadily rising. And of course, there's a lot of children in that number. Unfortunately, I fear that if there has been this heavy bombardment overnight, even if it wasn't exactly a ground invasion, that number will increase. And the Israeli army confirmed to me, as you said, that this was not necessarily a ground invasion, but they were carrying out strikes on targets in Gaza. And from what I can understand from military sources, is that they're increasingly relying on artillery, tanks, and also from the sea. And that is why there's been this increase in fire on the Gaza Strip.
And what is the sentiment there in Gaza about this possible eviction of these Palestinians from their homes in East Jerusalem? What's the intensity of feeling about that?
Well, this is obviously a very important issue for Palestinians, both in Jerusalem and also those in Gaza. And certainly there were rallies held in Gaza in support of the families that are going to be evicted from Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in East Jerusalem, particularly as the United Nations has come forward and said that it could actually be a war crime. That's really been part of that of this kind of escalation to where we are today. Speaking to the people in Gaza this evening, obviously because of the increased levels of airstrikes and artillery fire, they're saying that quite a few people have begun to leave northern Gaza and head further south. So I sent photographs of families with their bags trying to move further south away from the border, hoping that might make it a bit easier for them. I think they also fear that while there may not have been a ground invasion this evening, that is something that's on the cards. Certainly the Israeli army was talking about tabling a plan for this, which would then be handed on to political leaders for approval or not. So at the moment, it doesn't look like that there is any hope of any de-escalation.
And from the people you've spoken to in Gaza, do they support the actions of Hamas firing rockets into Israel over this?
I think you can find people who support Hamas and people who don't. I think there are people within Gaza who just want peace, who do not want to have to live under the nightmare bombardment that they are literally cowering under right now. But I think there's also a contingent in Gaza who do support what Hamas is doing because they do see Israel as the chief enemy. So it's quite a divided place and the emotions are pretty high. I think if you were to speak to most families, if you would ask them, do you want this war to continue? The answer, or this conflict to continue, the answer would be a firm no. People want to be able to live their lives. They want their children not to be scared, and they want, ultimately civilians pay that price on both sides of the border crossing.
And what's it been like to see those really ugly incidents within Israeli borders over the past couple of weeks, with mobs turning on each other, individuals and each other?
Oh, I was actually in Lod, which is in southern Israel, and your correspondent mentioned briefly yesterday, and it was really bleak to be there. The level of violence was huge. The barrage of rockets were coming down on crowds as they were clashing, and as security forces were firing stun grenades. It was almost surreal. It was almost like the conflict between Gaza and Israel was just a sort of secondary sideshow to the real conflict, which was between the Arab or Palestinian citizens of Israel and the Jewish citizens. And this, of course, has also spread across other towns across the country. We've had horrific footage showing lynchings, stabbings, shootings, mobs, going around neighborhoods, smashing businesses, breaking into homes. It really does feel extraordinarily on edge here. I've covered this part of the world and this country for years, and I've never felt so this level of tenseness in the streets and distrust from two sides.
Yeah, and what's the depth of concern there within the Israeli administration about those clashes within Israel? Is it the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu has called on the mobs on both sides to stop that?
Well, I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu has even discussed the possibility of diverting troops from the battle in Gaza
Wow.
to his own cities in Israel. I don't think that will go ahead. I've spoken to the police spokespeople. At the moment, it's just police that's managing the unrest in the cities. But certainly that would be a major escalation in the middle of a near war to move your forces to your own cities because you think it's that bad. The Israeli president has said that has likened it to a civil war. The mayor of Lod actually said that he'd lost control of the city. So it really does feel like even if the rocket barrages from Gaza stop, even if the airstrikes over Gaza stop, that doesn't mean that you're going to end up having a peaceful situation in Israel. It feels like you've got a war within a war at the moment, with this situation unraveling across multiple cities.
Yeah. Okay, Belle True, Middle East correspondent for The Independent. Thanks so much for talking to us today from Jerusalem.